All right, so welcome back. We're going to jump right into section 1.5, which hopefully you're probably scratching your head and say, well, wait a minute, why are we at 1.5? Didn't we just do 1.6 and 1.7? Yeah, well, there's a reason for that, and it's just to keep that flow of doing operations versus jumping into something a little bit different. So what we're doing today is a little bit different. So we're going to look at rounding and estimating. So rounding and estimating, they're kind of the same thing because rounding is simply a way of estimating the actual number. So it turns out we can do rounding a couple of different ways. So I have a couple of examples here. So 528 can be rounded up to 530, while 72,913 can be rounded down to 72,900. So now the big question is how do we know which way we're rounding? And the answer is it depends on what place value you're rounding to. So the place values is going to be very important for this section. So if you didn't think they were worthwhile previously, they are when it comes to rounding. So, okay, so the steps are, the first thing is to find the digit to be rounded. So call it the rounding digit. So just for short. Anyways, even though the rounding digit is important, you really are not looking at that to determine how to round. You're actually looking at the number to the right of it. So if the number to the right of the rounding digit is 5 or more, we want to add 1 to the rounding digit. If it's 4 or less, then we leave it alone. And then after that, you change all the digits to the right of the rounding digit to zeros. So it's a pretty succinct process, but let's see it in action. So we have 6,153, and we want to round it to the nearest 10. So the first thing you should do is say, okay, well, the nearest 10 is going to have to be the 5. So now that you've done step 1, step 2 says, what does that 3 want you to do to the 5? Do we leave it alone or do we round it up? Because it's 4 or less, we have to leave it alone. So that 5 isn't going to change. So now step 3 says to change all the digits to the right to zeros. So that's what we're going to do to finish it. So 6,150 should be your new rounded answer. All right, let's try the nearest 100. So the nearest 100, so now the digit we're focusing on is the 1. The number to the right, though, is a 5. So now we want to add 1 to the rounding digit. So that 1's going to have to change to a 2. And then all the digits after it change to zeros. That's it. That's all we're doing is just trying to round these properly. Let's try the next one. 83,491. And we want to round it to the nearest 1,000. So which digit are we focusing on? Hopefully you're screaming the 3. So 3 is in the 1,000 spot. So the number to the right is, a 4. So the 4 says we had to leave it alone. So this should end up being 83,000. All right. How about the nearest 10,000? So nearest 10,000, that should be the 8. So now the number to the right of that is a 3. So again, we got to leave that 8 alone. So we got to have an 8 and then a bunch of zeros. 80,000. All right, the last one here is a bigger one. So we got the nearest 100,000. So in the nearest 100,000, hopefully you're focusing on that 6. So the nearest 100,000, so the digit after it is a 1. So we got to leave it alone. And then don't forget the negative. The negative is important. It's a way for math instructors to take off points just because you don't feel like putting a minus sign in. So don't forget it. All right. So the nearest 10 million for the last one. So hopefully you're looking at this 3. That's the 10 million spot. So now, though, the number to the right is a 9. So now we do want to round it up. So we should change it to a 4. And then we got a bunch of zeros after it. Negative 140 million. Phew. All right. And that's rounding. Usually it's just typically they give you a place value to round it to, and then you got to do the rounding. Now, there are other types. We're going to look at one other type of rounding, and it's called front end rounding. So this is a little bit more interesting because you don't have a place value that you're focusing on, because it does it always the same way. It always rounds to the highest place value of the number. So in this case, we're going to be focusing on the 3. Here we would be focusing on the 5. Here we would be focusing on the 4. You're looking at the digit all the way to the left and rounding to that digit. So let's try these last couple of problems here, and that will wrap up this section. Okay, so we got negative 42 plus 89. So if we first did front end rounding, what would those change to? So the negative 42 should be negative 40, and 89 should round up to 90. So again, we're looking at the 4, and we're looking at the 8. So that's our rounded, or our estimate. So now what's the answer to that? What would negative 40 plus 90 be? What do we got to do with those two numbers? Ooh, you got to remember back to the addition rules. The signs are different, so we're really subtracting. So if we're really subtracting, 90 minus 40 is 50. And it's going to be a positive 50 because 90 is bigger. So, all right. So that gives us an idea of what the answer is going to be close to, but what's the actual answer? So if we say negative 42 plus 89, we're still going to want to subtract, but in this case, we're going to get 47. And 47 is pretty close to 50, so that's probably correct. All right, what about the next one? So negative 273. We're hopefully rounding to this 2, and so that's going to round up to negative 300. All right, what about negative 3081? So how about negative 3100? Does that look right? My buzzer's not working. It's not. What's wrong with it? Well, you're rounding to this 0 if you rounded it to negative 3100. So we don't want to do that. That's not front end rounding. We got to round it to this 3. So this is not going to be 3100. It's going to be 3000. So 3000. And now we can finish it off. Now, if you're not quite sure how to rewrite the subtraction, you can go back to the other video. But remember, you can do a little squeeze. Squeeze that plus sign in there. So this is going to be negative 300 plus a negative 3000. So now we can go back to our rules for addition. So the rules would say that we should add these. Because they have the same sign, we should add them. So this should be negative 3,300. All right. So now what is it actually? Well, negative 273. And we already can do the squeeze on this one. And so we end up with negative 3081 for there. So we still want to add. And what do we get? Let's just do it down here just to make sure. So if we add those, we get a 4, 15 carry a 1, 3, and a 3. So it looks like we're going to get negative 3,354. Again, pretty close, within 100 of our estimate. So that's not bad, especially based on the size of these numbers. So that's kind of your indicator that you're doing it right. Okay, so that wraps up this video, and we'll see you in the next one. The next one's going to be broken into a few because there's a lot of layers to it. So see you soon.